Hey there, if you are the parent of a young child and you happen to be bilingual, you may be wondering how that's going to impact your little one's communication development. I'm Jill, also known as the Mentor Mom, and today I'm going to be sharing my take on toddler language acquisition in bilingual homes, as well as some tips for parents. So let's get to it. So you know me, I always like to start with a little bit of research. So let's talk about some of the research-based evidence that supports the benefits of growing up in a bilingual home. The first of which is that children from bilingual homes tend to show greater cognitive flexibility, meaning they have better problem-solving skills. In addition, they often demonstrate superior executive functioning skills as compared to their monolingual peers. And what that means are things like attention control, working memory, and task switching. And the theory behind that is because they have to switch in and out of the two languages so frequently. And finally, if you're worried about your little one having a speech delay because they're learning two different languages, what the research actually shows is that most kids catch up and actually surpass their monolingual peers, having accelerated language and learning in both languages later on. One thing we know for sure about young children is their brains are primed to learn language at a young age. So exposing them to two languages is a wonderful thing for many, many reasons. So for those of you who feel like your little one is maybe showing some mild delays in their language acquisition, let's talk a little bit about that whole process there. And this is just a framework I have kind of put together in my head to try to make sense of what it's like for little ones as they're learning language. So I envision our little toddlers as having their own little office area. And as they learn a word, they have a piece of paper and they just kind of set it on the floor. You know, in the beginning, as they're starting to understand things, they've only got a couple of pieces of paper on the floor, like maybe ball and dog and cup. But then they're starting to learn more and more. So there's more and more paper on the floor. So they're like, oh my goodness, in order for me to be able to find those words, I better start sorting and filing them. So they get themselves a little filing cabinet and they put those papers in some file folders. And this is where they're starting to learn to kind of categorize. So let's say a child's first animal that they were able to name was a dog. And then everything that has four legs and fur is a dog to them. A cow is a dog. A cat is a dog. When you ask them in pictures, what is that? They always say dog. Well, that's because they've got the file folder, they've got the dog picture in there, but they've got dog at the top of the file folder instead of animal. With time, practice, and repetition, as they start to add more pictures to that file folder, they start to realize, oh, this one is a cat, and this one is a goat, and this one is a pig. I need a different label at the top. Animals, got it. Same with fruit. Apple, everything is an apple. An orange is an apple. A peach is an apple. And eventually they start to learn, oh, no, fruit goes at the top of that one. So they're in the process of this constant organizing and filing of all of these new words that they're starting to learn, understand, and use. Now, for a little one in a bilingual home, they have two filing cabinets. They have an English filing cabinet, and let's just say they have a Spanish filing cabinet. So they've got more work to do and more papers to figure out on where they go and make sure that they get them in the right file cabinets. And that's going to take more time and practice. So that's just kind of how I envision and describe this process for parents. So it makes sense that a little one in a bilingual home may be a little bit slower on the uptake. And it doesn't mean that they're not learning and they're not understanding. It's just taking them a little bit more time to do that filing. Before I forget, make sure that you like and subscribe to my channel. It really helps me get my information out in front of other parents who are looking for support. So let me share some tips for parents who are raising their children to be bilingual. And the first tip is to make sure that when you're having conversations with your child, and I'm just going to use the analogy of Spanish for simplicity purposes. So when you're having conversations with your child, you're either doing it all in English or we're doing it all in Spanish. We are not mixing them together during that conversation, okay? Because so much of communication and language is learned within the context of all the words. So an example of what we don't want to do would be if we're looking at a book and there's a picture of a turtle, to say to our little one, oh, look at that. That is a tortuga. I'm using all English, but then I'm using the label in Spanish, which I don't know much Spanish, just a few words here and there. But that's just an example of what we don't want to do. We want to say that entire phrase to them either in English or in Spanish. Oh, look, that's a turtle. I'm not going to say it in Spanish because I don't know all the other words. I only know tortuga. So make sure that when you're having conversations with your child that you're either using sentences and paragraphs that are all in English or all in Spanish. Now that's not to say, I'm not saying you can't do both. I'm just saying don't mix them together because it's going to take them longer. Think about how hard it's going to be for them to file those papers. Wait a minute, she said some of that in English, she said some of that in Spanish. I don't know which filing cabinet I should put that in. Okay, so make sure that you're using complete sentences when you're communicating in whichever language you're using at that moment. The second tip is I encourage you as a parent to think big picture. I've had a lot of families over the years who, because their little one seems to have a proclivity to picking up on English, maybe quicker than the Spanish, that the parent then kind of focuses more on the English. But I want you to think big picture. What language do you want your child to be using at the dinner table? If the answer to that is, I want my family, when we're sitting at the dinner table, speaking only Spanish, then that would really be the language that you should focus on with your little one. Whatever language you are speaking primarily in the home, if 95% of the time in your house, everybody's speaking language, that is what you should focus on. Don't worry about the English in that situation. I assure you, your little one is going to pick up English quickly once they start going to school. It is everywhere and their brains are primed for learning that language. So if you have a little one who's not doing a lot of communicating and you really are primarily speaking one particular language in your home, that's the language you should focus on. That's the one that you want them to be able to communicate their wants and needs in sooner. So don't worry about the English. Focus on the language that you want them using during the daily routines. So another tip is for those families who are primarily speaking English, but they really want to be able to start introducing more of a second language to their little one. So a great way to do that is just to infuse it into maybe one particular routine to start. So maybe at bath time, we're really going to focus on Spanish, or maybe during snack times, we're really going to focus on English, whatever the case may be. Daily routines are one of the best ways to teach language and communication to young children. So you can use that as a tool to introduce a second language to your little one. My last tip is to keep it really fun, keep it really light, and try not to do too much correcting. It's not going to be uncommon for a little one in a bilingual home to kind of mix those words together. Again, they're trying to figure out which filing cabinet they should be pulling their information. So if they happen to do a little bit of a mixture, you're just going to model it back in one language. So if they happen to say, oh, look, it's a tortuga, you would say back either in English or Spanish, oh yes, that is a turtle. You're right. You're just modeling what it really is that they should be saying. We're not saying, no, that's not right. You need to say blah, 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 blah. We don't want to do that, or we're going to shut them down and they're going to be like, well, this really stinks and I don't want to do it. So just be a really, really good language model. Affirm their attempt, yes, and then model it in whichever language you feel is appropriate in that moment. All right, that is it for this week. If you have any questions, make sure that you drop them in the comments below. I'm always happy to answer your questions and provide feedback. All right, that's it, you guys. Until next time.